Good morning and welcome to our first broadcast from what is going to be a series of podcasts entitled Filtering the Noise with ATP Enable. With me today I have Richard Nisbett, who is the MD of ATP Enable, and I also have Ben Weston, who's also the MD of Digital Inc. Morning, guys.
Morning, Graham.
First time in the podcast studio?
It is.
Yeah. It's going to be exciting. Who knows where this could go? So these two guys are really shaking up the world in relation to SIMs. And I can tell you from what I know already, you're going to really want to hear what these two guys have to say. So we're super excited to have them here today, and we're super excited to see over a series of podcasts what they will actually share with us. So, but before we start, I think it's far better that we get the guys to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about themselves. So, Richard, why don't we start with you? Why don't you just tell us who you are, what you do, and a little bit about your background?
Yeah, of course. So, hi, morning, Graham. I'm Richard. I'm the MD of ATP Enable. I've been involved in this market now for just over 20 years. In fact, started at Charterhouse Voice and Data about 3 or 4 roads down from here. Was with those guys for a while, then moved to a company called Mobile Account Solutions. Really exciting company to work for. We were 4th, 3rd and 2nd in the Times Fast Track 100. So 3 consecutive years, first time that was ever done. And been involved in everything mobile ever since. So it first started in 2001 with the introduction of the BlackBerry and access to email, and yeah, been in the market ever since.
Fantastic. So you are marinated in this
Mr. Sim, yeah.
in this industry. Ben, what about you?
Okay, yeah, Ben Weston, CEO and founder of Digital Inc. Limited. I have a technical background in lithographic print and digital prepress, digital asset management, and then from there moved into a technical consultancy, where I ended up working on consultative projects at Whitehall and also Number 10. And it was there that we discovered the opportunity for the SIM production that we now have and are deploying on some of the larger projects around the country and actually in North America as well.
Fantastic. Must have been really interesting working closely with Number 10. It's a world that not many of us actually get access to.
Moving on.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for those intros, guys. And yeah, interesting to hear a little bit of your potty background. I think you did very well just to keep that within about 30 seconds each. Really good. So before we start, what I want to do is I want to try and set the context for the audience who are listening to this for the first time. So just a little bit to understand your world. You guys, you cover several different markets, but today what I want to talk about is I want to talk about the Internet of Things, because I do know that your SIM has a very big role to play within that arena. So before we start, let's talk about things. Let's talk about and where SIMs play a role in those things. So Richard, why don't you share with us what those things are and what's so relevant around the SIMs that obviously you're bringing to market?
Yeah, of course. So SIMs are the tool to actually pass the data within these devices. So one of the largest growing markets for us is within utilities. So with that, I mean things like EV car charging, gas meters, water meters, smart meters, anything that requires the supplier to understand what's happening at the point of the device, whether it be for an emergency purpose, for billing purpose, and the growth of that market at this point is really interesting. We've got a bit of a perfect storm here in terms of 2G and 3G being terminated. So legacy IoT SIMs that have been in place for many years are needing now to be replaced because the service is becoming obsolete and the demand for more data quickly is growing. Not only that, but they're seeing digital transformation projects actually improve the efficiency of these. So things like vending machines. Instead of sending a guy in a van with a van full of everything that's possibly needed in the vending machine will actually tell them what's required. It's out of Cokes, it's out of Mars bars, it's out of whatever. So they're not having to carry the equipment, they're not having to use so much diesel, and they can be more energy efficient in terms of that consumption side, all because they're able to report remotely about what's happening at that unit. And there's some really weird and wonderful cases as well. One I always like to refer to is a recent council that put SIMs into body cameras. These were linked to streamers. and the body cam would actually check and detect for endangered flowers, because the council was getting fined for damaging endangered flowers. So the SIM's in the unit into the body cam. If it picks up an endangered flower, it kills the connection of the strimmer, therefore stops the fine.
Unbelievable. That's amazing. I would never have thought that somebody would have thought about using a SIM in relation to that. Ben, from your perspective, obviously you've been the ideas guy. You're the one that's created this fantastic product and brought it to market, and obviously working closely with Richard here. In relation to what started your journey in thinking about the application of Internet of Things, was it because of your involvement with Number 10 and around legislation?
Yeah.
Was that a key driver of what you saw? And then obviously you saw the application benefits of what you could do with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Without going too far down that road, it basically stemmed from the digital by default remit. So first port of call for contact for a stakeholder within a local authority, a county authority, or a borough needed to be digital, because obviously that means that just get the mic. That means that you're saving money on paper publishing. And flyers, that kind of thing. So the digital process of connectivity was an exciting proposition until we actually got to the root of things and realised that 33% of stakeholders were digitally excluded because they had no connectivity or skill set.
Wow.
So we then moved into the process of digital inclusion. And digital inclusion proffers two things. It's having a skill set and having a connected device. Problem with that is, if you are, as a .gov public body, providing an internet connection for someone, in particular a minor or a vulnerable adult, you have to conform to Section 26 of the Counter-Terror Act, which means you can't provide something that is going to give somebody access to content or material on the internet that is of an extremist or a radical ideology type content. I don't care where it comes from, but you can't do that.
Yeah.
And you're held accountable for that.
Yeah, really interesting. And I know on our next podcast, we're particularly going to be talking about that. In relation to legislation also, and I think, Richard, you might have spoken about it the other day when we were talking, in relation to a lot of the utility companies and how they need to be changing their meter devices. Was it from copper connectivity, and then they're now having to put SIMs in that to connect accordingly? Is that something? And, one of the other things you spoke to me about was smart cities. Is that a commonly adopted term, and is that part of that adoption of SIMs as well?
Yeah, so I think smart cities is a very publicly known term within the sector. We're seeing SIMs in a number of things now, within advertisement boards, within bus stops, public and free Wi-Fi access on public transport like buses or trains. And the way of delivering to that previously would have been through copper connections. But what you've had is what's known as the big switch off for 2025. It's been coming for 15, 20 years, pretty much since I've been in the industry, but they've moved the deadline back, but it's now a firm deadline that from 2025. That previous copper connection, the old way of connecting, whether it be a phone line or your traditional internet circuit, is not going to be available anymore. So the adoption of SIMs has grown from that need, and that's where the smart cities has come into. Because of the size of the SIM and the remote nature in terms of that being delivered, you're able to put it in many other applications. So yeah, it's an interesting market to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go to the next area, and something that it may be a misconception. But when we all talk about connectivity, and I think in all probability, everybody thinks about SIMs and they think about their phones, don't they? But in all probability...
Or cellular, yeah.
Yeah, cellular, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Got nicely corrected there. Anyway, but everybody thinks about their phones and cellular. And I would say, well, what happens when you lose signal? It's a flaky connection. And what if you have your SIMs in these Internet of Things? Surely, is the network strong enough? Is it big enough? How are you overcoming that, Ben? What's been your view on that?
Right. So we've got two very different sort of playing fields here, really. So when you have a handset, you'll have a single network SIM.
Yep.
So whether it's your EE, Voda, 3, O2, and that's what you'll be used to. When we're looking at the de facto now really is on IoT or any kind of telematics, whatever the case may be, or data-driven devices, tablets, that kind of thing. It's always going to have to be, or should be, non-steered MultiNet. So that's very common now.
Yep.
So that is a complete sea change from having one SIM, one network connection. If you move out of line of sight or clear sight of a tower and you lose signal, then you got a problem. Mm-hmm. When you're with a MultiNet SIM, a non-steered MultiNet SIM, not a steered SIM,
yep.
because of, in my opinion, no good for man nor beast.
And I think that's an important point to make. The competition out there, when it comes down to prices, was quite important. We tend to find they tend to be steered solutions. And what Ben's alluding to there is the fact that it has a primary network. And when you start to get into the T's and C's of that, it's really interesting that they try to force, I think it's 80% of the traffic down the primary. So it's only at the point that it's absolutely unusable that they will put it over to option 2 or option 3, where what Ben's solution does is it's completely non-steered. There's no proprietary network. There's no preference in terms of what it's selecting. The option is whatever's best from what's available. And I think that's really important.
It's a stronger signal in proximity to the SIM.
Okay.
But again, other people can do that. What we can do remotely with a client is if we have a MultiNet SIM, all 4 networks in the UK, or if it's 2 or 3 networks or all networks in the US, North America, wherever it is, it doesn't matter, or one of the 47 networks, around the regions of the EU that we work within, we can actually assist with the client and say, if you've got a predominant network within your a particular working region for a remote device or user, whatever the case may be, we can actually assist and nail that one network down to that using the same common profile SIM. Mm. But that's not what makes us unique. It's a foundation for what we do, because you've got 2 parameters here with what we do. And those parameters are always on connectivity, so 99.9% uptime, because I don't care what anybody says, it's never 100%. Mm-hmm. And we're relying on networks that we bounce off in terms of you pick up signals from cell towers. The other thing is making sure that the content and the examination of content is appropriate, fit for purpose, and meets your sector's regulatory compliance.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you what the challenges are around sharing data across networks. And obviously we're talking today about IoT. We're going to talk about, obviously, things around children, protecting children and the young society. But from a business perspective, what's the challenges of making sure that data is secure, whatever's being shared across the network?
It's the secure way of delivering it, isn't it? So, again, as Ben alluded to, the standard mobile network operators, your EEs, your O2s, your Vodafones, your BTs, that they deliver the traffic through public IP. The problem with public IP is it's public, so you don't have the protection, you don't have the privacy, and when you're in EV car charging, for example, there's 2 SIMs in each of these units. One of them is actually delivering and reporting on the electricity to the electricity supplier, how many watts have you used, what's going to be the associated charge based on that, and then the other side is actually the payment for it. So you've used X watts, it's cost you X amount, you're then taking customer details, bank details for payment. So if that's running across a public IP SIM, the issue you've got is the minute it leaves those devices, because the devices can be secure, it's the delivery of that traffic over a cellular network to keep it safe. And that's what Digital Link do that no others do.
So interesting, because obviously cybersecurity is a massive issue right now. Yeah. And as soon as you start to say to me about payments, what's been developed to actually protect anybody interfering or accessing in any way. I mean, we're seeing recently all these lovely Range Rovers and Land Rovers being stolen and stuff like that. What is out there that's going to stop people abusing that as such?
And there's two components to that. This is multifaceted or layered, if you like. So you've got to protect the end user, and you've got to mitigate risk for the business, the provider of the connectivity that's running back to their the centre of their reason for being, the service that they provide. So SIMs are a conduit for passing data, MOMT, originating and terminating. So what's the point, as Richard was just saying, what's the point of securing edge devices and not securing the cellular connection that goes across them? And again, a lot of people, it can provide a secured tunnel, but what you need for the next step up is, and especially in very specific industries, we work very closely, with Richard in utilities and healthcare. You're mandated to comply or adhere to your regulatory compliance. And the only way you can truly do that is provide an evidence base that tells people and proves to people you weren't complicit in an illicit act.
Right.
And you only do that by providing an evidence-based report. So the key difference from what we do is we provide always on 99%, always on connectivity. Doesn't matter what region in the world you're in. We provide that private, or that we provide that secure tunnel, but we provide public IPs externally, but in terms of security routing, it's all private IP. And then we interrogate and decrypt the content that's going across and say, right, this is what you attempted to do. This is what we allowed you to do. This is an alert to say this is what somebody's attempting to do, all at network level. So if you took that SIM out and put it into another device, the same thing would apply. Yep. It's not dependent on MDM. It's not dependent on firmware in terms of security elements at the edge device, because that's what people do.
Yeah, it's interesting because in my mind I'm thinking, well, what's the obligation of the provider? So from EE or O2 or anything like that. And basically what you're saying, that there isn't it. Everything's done.
Well, there's BBFC filtering.
Right, okay.
Age-related filtering.
Okay.
And what's the biggest, I might be coming off topic here, but what's the biggest worry for an MNO? You choke traffic, you lose income, your shareholders get upset. You choke traffic. If you look, and this will be in an upcoming podcast. Yeah. You choke traffic. If you look at the stats on the amount of gaming and pornography data from under 15 and 16-year-olds, it's frightening. Pornography is not illegal if you're 18 and above, and it's not dark web. But the point is, you have to have an appropriate and an acceptable behaviour at work, whether it's IoT, school, whatever it is, policy to say, right, this is allowed and that's not allowed. And if it's not allowed, we have to be able to say we can provide an evidence base for it. Yeah. This is what the attempt was. And more importantly, we have to block that threat.
Yeah, it's interesting. And you're right. We're going to talk about that. And it's difficult to sometimes disconnect between the two things.
It's the same functionality.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're just filtering that data. So Richard, when you're obviously taking this to market and talking to people about this, lots of hoops you must have to jump through to actually prove that, this app or these SIMs actually comply with that regulation. Yeah. Is that quite a timely exercise for you, or is there a lot of things that when you're talking to people, they don't even know what hoops they've got to jump through to actually look at this?
So typically what we do with customer engagements is take their acceptable by use behaviour policy. So what that means is, if I'm sitting in an office on a PC, if we're going back 15 years when I had a big thick screen because it wasn't a flat screen and you had to be in the office, you had firewalls and security policies for your on-premise network. Yep. What we essentially do is replicate that policy but apply it at a cellular level. So the working from home environment now is far more mainstream. I don't think it's going anywhere. So what we need to do is actually start providing these security policies that we've been adhering to for decades whilst on premise on a cellular network. And I think that relates back quite nicely to the IoT perspective in terms of that security and that proof of concept for customers. So we completed during COVID the largest NHS digital transformation project for connectivity. And
which we're very proud of.
Yeah, you should be.
During a terrible time, it was nice to do something good. And one of the projects we got involved with, there was a rather lengthy POC, but what we actually provided was not only a secure connection with best network always first in terms of connectivity, but we also demonstrated a number of cyber threats that were open and exposed to that SIM during that pilot, because we were given a list of pre-approved IPs. This is what we want to have access to, nothing else. So we have the rules through Ben's solution to actually approve these and nothing else. So not only does it allow the MO traffic in terms of from the device to the external internet, but it also stops the threats from the external internet. So if it's not a known IP that we're expecting to hear back from a server, from an email server, from a certain application that's been approved, we decline it. And I think, if we're honest, the number of threats were actually Russia in terms of region. But yeah, we were able.
But you were able to
stop
report on that and obviously show that potential vulnerability.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing, in addition to that, is that we can decrypt content. IPv6 content, so SSL decryption. We can take a look at the content, not only the whitelisting of IPs, or using firewalls to prevent endpoint disconnects or blocks. But what we do is we don't look at a web address. We look at the content behind the web address. So if you've got Janet and John gardening services, and then you look behind that and there's radical content in an extremist nature, we look at that. We say that's not fit for purpose. We alert that. We block that. We include that within the evidence-based report. Now, we could have an estate of 1 million SIMs for one client. We give a monthly, a weekly, or an ad hoc report. And then if we have a terror threat, or if we have any other kind of threat, threat to life, whatever the case may be, then we can isolate one SIM out of that entire estate and run the report on that one SIM. And then what we do is we transpose APN logs and filter logs, bring the two together, and we can then say, this moment in time, this 10-second pass was this data. And then we can provide that evidence for any kind of support or protection for the company in terms of mitigating a risk to the business if there was an attempted illicit content or approach to trying to get hold of illicit content or an illicit act. And then also, as importantly, and in many cases more importantly, protect the user from what they may have succumbed to.
Yeah, whether that be content, whether that be fraud, whether it be a whole host of
functionality remains the same. So it's the application of the rule and the regulation and the profile that dictates what sector we work in, whether it's IoT or protecting kids.
Yeah. So let's just stay on topic in relation to IoT a little bit. One thing I always like to do is, we can look at the framework of where you are right now. In relation to IoT and what next, where will this go? Where will this evolve? Where will this develop? Because obviously all the application devices you're telling me that are using SIMs at this moment in time, are we at saturation point, or are we still inventing ways to use this technology? Where do you see it going?
Well, are you talking about the marketplace? It's going to be in everywhere, and the format of connectivity and conduit will change.
Yeah, and so it's the framework of the things.
The migration to eSIM for argument.
Yeah, it's the things we've not spoken about today. Yeah. So the things that are being focused on, but what about outside of that? Where is it going to expand to? Smart cities. Where will it expand to next? And where will we see these SIMs in relation to devices and things that we never ever thought would have connectivity?
Everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, there's a industry statistic being banning around. They're expecting 1 million SIMs for every square mile in cities and towns.
1 million SIMs?
Yes. Wow. The applications are kind of endless. Like we say, smart lampposts. We spoke pre the podcast about another customer you're working with about the sort of energy efficiency. It's delivered into smart buildings. Mm-hmm. You're getting them a lamppost in CCTV cameras. There was a recent BBC article about a CCTV camera that had public IP SIMs that was hacked, and it ended up being on Panorama. You're getting SIMs in soil to tell you when the soil needs watering, because to keep the plants or the food production at its optimum, that's the point it needs to be watered. We're going to have drones and bots and things delivering Amazon parcels, and you need a way of delivering the data to that unit for it to be able to go somewhere. In transportation and logistics, I think the statistic again is there's 11 SIMs on average in every lorry. In fuel, in emergency situations for an accident to contact the police, there's so much data that's required to make everything more efficient and everything more profitable. And the delivery of that is typically through something smart. But the way it's smart is it needs to report back to tell you what's happening. Yeah. If it's physically on site and you don't know what's going on, it is very difficult to monitor and improve.
And I guess also as well, and it's quite a topical sort of area for us, because we're more and more now we're getting involved in conversations around AI. Mm-hmm. Once you have that data, then you can make intelligent and informed decisions in relation to how do we run our operation. We were talking the other day to a logistics company, and they were saying as soon as the order's picked, AI will actually then choose the carrier based on location, pickup time, next location that they're going to, and all these things are happening just as a result of just having that data.
Well, we have an AI component within our monitoring and filtering process. So we have automatic policy injection. So working with people like CTIRU, the Counter-Terror Internet Referral Unit, we can inject, or they can inject into our filter policies wherever you are in the world with an associated partner, security agency in the EU, whatever the case may be. If they find a threat, they'll inject it to the policy and protect the user ongoing in the background. No touch point. No touch point for the user or the client that's purchased a SIM for their deployment for their business. And the whole point is, these are processes that are automated for mitigating risk for everybody. That's what they are. It's about controlling the right content, the safe content, the appropriate content, and actually injecting into policies automatically protection against new threats that are found either by security agencies or by the global aggregation around the world of the estate.
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
It's
It
why
really-
would you? It's for our product. It's why would you not want that level of security and mitigation of risk? Because of the best story in the world is a bad story, and the bad story for somebody was GDPR, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The breaches of GDPR, and everybody was it's okay. So it was Data Privacy Act, and GDPR after that became more onerous as time goes on. All regulation becomes more onerous. There are 90 UK regulators in the UK, and you have to adhere to them.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating to hear that and that degree of detail as such. And certainly I know as we go on, and I did say to everybody at the beginning of this podcast, I did say that you're going to want to hear what these guys are going to talk about. And I'm like super excited. And I guess we could probably sit here and talk about this particular thing around IoT for the next hour or so. But but we've got to call today's podcast to a conclusion. Ben, Richard, it's been absolutely fascinating. We can't wait to get you back on the next podcast. So the next one is we're going to be talking about digital inclusion. We're going to be talking about child safety. We're going to be talking about how the SIMs that these guys are working with are really helping in that area. So until next time, thanks for listening today. Ben, Richard, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.
you.